if I was to say to you right now that in a meditation we could travel 500 years into what you consider your future, and I would take you there, and you would definitely see things because that's the energy that I carry with me. Um, you can either have an incredible experience and love everything you see, or it can be a really dark experience for you. And the two of you could have two entirely different experiences depending on where your consciousness is at the deepest level of your soul. And that's what's very interesting. Because if people are going to do something like that, and you have 10 people who see it this way and 12 people will see it a different way, what does that do to the reality? There's a struggle. So which one is true? Well, depending on the consensus of the group you're with and the majority of it, that's what's true, the consensus of it. That is how tenuous our ability is to touch the future.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to another edition of Soul Explorers. Today we have returning champion, Jeanne Love, with us. She is a medium extraordinaire, and we have a really interesting podcast for you today. Welcome to the show, Jeanne. Again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited about being here today. I love you guys. Love being in your space, your energy, and everything is just very exciting.
We love you too, and are so happy to have your smiling face with us today. And from what I understand, you have been connecting with an entity that most of the world knows as Seth, who was originally channeled by Jane Roberts, if I'm remembering everything correctly. And he has been very active lately and wanting to communicate some more. Could you tell us, before we start talking to Seth, could you give us just a little bit of background about how you became associated with him, how he started to interact with you?
I'd be happy to, and I have to make sure I keep it short and sweet, but I had already been strongly active in my spiritual journey, and I met a lovely man who eventually married. But I had no idea who Seth was. I mean, I had the other gurus and all these other beings, but didn't know about Seth. And when we first met, Tom and I, my husband, he went and bought all the Seth books for me and left them where I live because we had just met, and called me and said, I left all these books for you under your porch ladder steps. I said, oh, okay. And he goes, yeah, they're all about Seth, and I want you to have these books and read them because then we'll have something to talk about. He was a scientist, so he needed things to talk about. And I did, and I was blown away. It was just fabulous. And then, I really could resonate. It was a big growth curve for me, all the things that we're saying about multidimensional realities and, simultaneous this and all that. And Tom went on to say later, when I asked him, because he was a mathematical physicist, and I asked him, have you learned the most from in your field? And he said, Seth. He said, Seth is the one that has really taught me about the realities, the dimensional stuff, et cetera, et cetera. That always impressed me. Anyway, I didn't necessarily channel him right away that I remember, although I know that he was with us. But then when I started working with the Challenger crew in 1986, and when I first felt his energy was 1979, but in 1986, that was when his energy was really prevalent. And his energy walked us through the work with the Challenger group and helping us with all that material. I mean, he was like that guide right there, going down the rapids, making sure that we could still stay in that little raft and didn't get thrown out. And if we did, we got pulled right back in. And I would have sessions in Toledo, Ohio, on Tuesday nights at a friend's house when the weather was good, because we lived in Adrian, Michigan. And he just taught us and worked more and more on the books that he'd already written through Jane. And one night particularly, my husband at the time was saying, well, show us that you're really Seth, that you're really who you say you are. And so he said, sure. He said, go over there and pick up one of the books, because my friend Roy had all of his books, and he's the one whose house we were at. He said, just pick up one of the books, anyone. I won't tell you what, just pick up a book. And I'm in full trance, so I don't see anything. And he said, and just open the book up and put your finger on the paragraph. And my husband did, and lo and behold, he started talking about that paragraph, just almost as if he was reading it. And needless to say, we were all just struck beyond the brilliance of Seth. And I never forget that story, and I think it's just incredible. He really wanted us to know that we were a group and that he was there. And so that's when the relationship really grew over the years. I've taught classes with Seth. He's led workshops. I recently, in the last 2 years during COVID, held a 12-week session, I think it was, Seth teaching the class. And he was teaching it from the point of view was, I've taught you all about the universe. Now I need to teach you how to be here in your body in this lifetime. And so then he talked about how we are here now. He identified his choices of words. He identified how he sees the greater reality differently in terms of how he used his vocabulary to describe it. And it really made so much more sense. He's really a teacher.
It seems interesting that he would be communicating more at this time in our history, because there's a lot going on energetically on the planet. So,
well, he's going to speak to that.
Good.
He's going to speak to that. I'm not going to go into full body trance. It's too energetically much for me anymore, but I'm so connected to his energy that it's just like he just kind of overlays with me, and you definitely feel his energy. You'll probably see my face change a little bit.
Oh, very good. Well, in that case, we will let you do what you need to do to get into close contact with him. And if he wants to start us off with a bit of a message for our audience, for the world at large, we would be grateful for any wisdom he has to share.
Well, first of all, I just want to remind us, because Gary and Sally, you know about the shield. So just imagine that's where we are right now. I've already put that in place for those watching that. It's extra protection because the world is in a volatile place right now. So we'll make sure that we have a lot of protection, that the higher energies are with us, and that there's no interference from anything that would be less than of the light and love that is that essence of source or God or the I am, or however we describe it. Give me a little minute or two and we'll be right there. Well, good day to all of you. I know it's still morning here for this one, and I believe it's afternoon in your time zone. And in my time zone, it's infinity and beyond. So I can have morning and night all at the same time. And if I'm not grounded, I'm a little crazy. But then everybody says I'm a little crazy anyway. So the first thing I would like to say to both of you is having the courage to put me out there in front of people when there have been thoughts and ideas about perhaps Seth wouldn't come through anybody else but Jane Roberts. And as I was explaining before they started the program, that part of me that came through Jane was that part of me that came through Jane. But there's another part of me that's coming through Jean. I like Jay's. And so this is the way this is connecting, because I'm an oversoul energy and I can take on various forms and essences. So there's a part of me that would relate to Jane, but then there's more of me that's coming through Jean, because Jean is a trained medium, whereas Jane was not a trained medium, and she learned of all things by the Ouija board, which was a scary thing in and of itself. But fortunately, everything was okay. And Jean, though, being that she was a trained medium, could open doorways with me in ways, and can still open doorways with me in ways that Jane could not. But there are other people that I work through, and there are other people who have had significant experiences with me. However, they may not have been very public about it. You cannot own a spirit. It's like saying, well, you can't be that person's friend. If that person's only going to be my friend for the rest of my, infinite structure of living. And if the personality gets involved, the ego gets involved, the the need to save something and flavor staying in your life as a being uniquely your own is unfortunately a strong component of what gets us in messes in the first place. And I will be speaking about that later in the conversation. If I don't know that it'll be a conversation, it's just probably going to be me standing on my very beautiful soapbox that I've been polishing for this moment. So at any rate, I welcome everybody who's wanting to experience this. I call it Seth 2024, and what that means and why I'm coming now. Well, I've always been around, and I've always been working with people. They've just been less public about it, as I said earlier, because there were these threats about it. But I am not unique to anyone. Certainly not Jeanne, and she's very well aware of it. Although I really do enjoy her because she's a little crazy like me, and because she's an extra large medium, and because she's known me for so long, and has held my energy very well because she's a seeker. She always wants to know more, show me more, help me understand the universe. What's my place in this? What do I need to show others? And so that's a bit of an introduction as to how she and I got together. And she did share just a moment ago how I was brought to her. Interestingly enough, now quite a few of the people that knew Seth in her group uh, uh, are on the other side. And so they've had some significant exchanges with me, and I won't go into that now, but it's amazing how they feel special in the fact that there is this unified field and we continue on in our conversations, whether we have a body or whether we don't have a body. I had a particularly striking experience with Jeannie's daughter, Kylene, who passed in 2011, because Kylene was a little angry about her mother's attention to other people other than herself, because there was always a plethora of spirits in their house. And Jeanne tried to keep it as organized as possible, but she was a magnet. She was a magnet to all of these, what Kylie would say were dead people. And there was a little jealousy, even amongst all of her daughters, about this. And I can hear the criticism now. Well, she should have paid more attention to her children. Well, she did, but she also had a mission, and her children were a part of that mission. Anyway, from here to there, Kylene sat down with me at a point in time after her leaving her body, in your framework of time, it was probably a good 2.5 years to 3 years after she had passed. And she went through a tremendous growth spurt in that conversation. The reason she said she wanted experiences with me from that side was so that she could help her mom bring in more energetic and clearer and broader and more refined. And so she needed to learn how to work with my energies as well as several others so that she could be a wonderful type of gatekeeper for her. And so she was reminded of it this morning when she took her SpongeBob SquarePants mug out to have her tea, because that was one of her daughter's favorite cartoons, even though she was older, but she was a kid at heart. So it's a continual process for those who feel called to my energy. My energy is not necessarily sweet. It's not necessarily cuddly. It's not necessarily I will protect you forever because I'm your leader kind of energy. I don't like that persona. I don't want to be a teacher that is thought to be some kind of pedestal walker. That is kind of insulting to me. I'm just someone who comes and offers information. I show you things that you can consider and be a part of, and then it's up to you to do your work, because I am not here to hold your hand, which sometimes ruffles people. But in the same token, I want the freedom of being able to go from place to place and not being held down by someone's ideology about what I should or shouldn't be doing with them. Thing is, when people show me that they are balanced and are responsible for their own lives, I will often give them information to help them, because I see their balance and I see they're capable of taking the information without using it as like I'm a crystal ball and they have to carry me everywhere that they go. I am not a messiah. I don't want to have that. I am just a being that has a lot of insight, because I'm an oversoul energy, and I have access to many libraries of consciousness, if you will. And that was used just a moment ago about Seth being like a library with all these books and parts. And I like to think of myself as that way. I just bring a part of myself into focus for this kind of communication, because if I were to bring all of myself anywhere, I would blow people up. The energy is just too much. And that's certainly not my my desire. It's people who can come to Seth. They don't have to be mediums. They don't have to be especially gifted. It's a matter of frequency and vibration and having their balance and within themselves, however they've evolved to that point where they can touch the frequency and feel called to it. And if they feel called to it and they feel comfortable with it, then it's a great learning experience and there is an attachment for that time period. Energy, of course, we know is everything. The energy is still in the books that Jeanne wrote. It's very much imbued in that. The work that Jeanne has done, the energy is very much imbued in that. And I'm just pushing her to do a little more to get back into a more visible arena, if you will. So the reason I'm coming back now is because I really love to share, and because Jeanne is such a wonderful match, and because, as you were saying earlier, both of you, before we started the official part of the program, is your world is in a very strange place right now, and so I want to address that first, if I may, and if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer that for both of you too. And thanking you again for giving me and Jeanne the opportunity of sharing our perspective, and hopefully it'll help some. The good and the bad of where I am, and I, of course, I'm in a different frequency range, so I have to work my way back. The part of me that is going to be connecting to Jeanne has to work my way back into her field of energy, and get the right amount of frequency, just like you would when you're turning on a radio, so that you can get the right call bandwidth, and you're not too loud and splurty and all sorts of strange things might magnetically might go on. Jeanne was feeling that last night when she tried to answer an email and everything was blipping off the page, and she goes, okay, I can't do this tonight. I'll have to wait till after Seth, because she was already accommodating the bridge and the reach between the two of us. I actually showed her a picture of what I was doing, somewhat hilariously, hopefully, was that I was sitting in an outdoor cafe in Paris, sipping my espresso and my cognac, dressed with one of those raincoats that are nice that the gentleman used to wear, and then I had a cigar in my hand, and then I had one of those fedora hats on, and she could see that I wasn't human in that process, but I was becoming close to that human range of frequency, so that we would be very compatible today. And she fortunately really is very receptive to me, so it's a fairly even shift. So the first thing I'd like to say is that everything looks the darkest before the dawn. That's the first cliche I'm going to throw at you. And the other cliche I'm going to throw at you is, or give to you, is it's always darkest before the light. It's the worst is there, and you think that's it. But if you wait long enough, things change. It's like the weather. But the frequency that all of you humans are involved in right now, close to, across the global arena, especially in the United States, is quite treacherous. It's quite threatening. It's quite diabolical. And of course, it's very upsetting. And we, those of us on the other side, many of us who choose to be available to the Earth community, very well aware of all this. We cannot interfere, but we do come in to give words of encouragement, to help the individuals and the collective find some peace and understand the hierarchy of evolution. And I talk a lot about evolution these days, and that was in Jeanne's big class that we gave, which I hope she makes available to people, as I don't want to have to say it all over again. But I like to look at being here in the earth plane more as an evolutionary process rather than a learning curve. Now, that doesn't mean we don't learn, but the overwhelming theme of coming into a human form is evolution, to evolve through whatever we've chosen to experience, whether it's the family we chose, whether it's a mission that we decided we haven't finished from another time period that we bring in now, or whether it's all of the above. And we're here to evolve through our own fears, the darkness, and to find the strength in our light in our center. And as I mentioned, Kylene again, she used to say to her mom early on after she left, because she definitely had lots of conversations with her mom. And she said, you know, Mom, this is a dark planet. And she said, if you can find your light here, you can find it anywhere. And actually, that's all I really have to say, although I will pontificate a bit more on that. But it's really the truth. This is we come here, and people have taken Jeanne to task on this when she says it, but it's my teaching really is that we don't come here to save the world, and there are people who really are taken aback by that. Those crusaders who perhaps in the 70s or 60s or 80s were saving the earth, and all these different groups came out to save the whales and to save the puppy dogs from the puppy mill, and the animals in the labs, and then our environment, which truly is a wonderful opportunity for growth. But what Jeanne knows, and I have helped support, is that it needs to be a positive motivation and not a negative one. And so therefore, when we bring to an effort a negative motivation, which would be fear that things will disappear, we bring fear to that opportunity. And it is really not subtle. And it's very important that people understand that in order to affect change, we must truly be within ourselves a balance and feel love in that situation. So if someone feels led to go out and save the whales, they need to do it because they love the creatures so much and know that that love will have an impact on whatever is chosen for facilitating protection. So that and people do want to go for the argument of, well, sometimes you have to be really angry before things change, and that is a human condition, that's for sure. The threat has to become that real, but then in the walking through that, then we have to go from fear to love, and love is something that we really don't have to even talk about in other worlds. It's something that's unique to this system, and when I say system, I don't refer to this galaxy as a dimension. It's a system. It's one of many systems, because dimensional space is far bigger than the human mind can grasp. But they've used that because that's come to them. But when you understand it's just a system that's part of many systems that fill up a dimension, it changes things, not to overwhelm in the sense of size being how can I affect change if I'm a little dot, like a piece of sand, but to understand that if we are this huge system and not even a dimensional space, it's amazing what we can do to change things, because we have to stop thinking about the limit of size and go from the clarity and the precise energy of field of energy and frequency. If you have the frequency that is very clear and very supported, and you use the frequency with what people call higher energies, and they have all these megahertz and terahertz and whatever, but the frequencies that are not yet even tallied, the science has not yet even found. That's one of the goals for the planet, from those beings that are helping this planet develop, is to get into the other frequencies that go beyond what you've already identified. And that then is a step towards a much better understanding of what quote unquote love is and what a love field is, because it goes beyond the still the personalization of love. Even though this world has been around for a long time and there's been many advanced civilizations that have come and gone, most of them leave because they've learned what they needed to learn in the collective. And of course, there's always a demise that we can blame on war or idiocy or illness, but they go out because they've learned as much as they can to that frequency they can hold, and then they move through and move out and move on, because groups come in, small groups come out, medium-sized groups come in, huge groups come in, and that's also what you're experiencing now in this world, is the I don't like to use the word battle, but that's how it appears, this battle between dark and light, between confusion and truth, between the frailty of a young energy versus a wise, older, mature energy, and those people who come in to help balance the planet already know that they're not here to save the planet. They know that is not their process, but they know how to affect change. They know how to bring forth a more beautiful, enhanced, balanced frequency or series of frequencies, which do affect those who are willing to hold it, to be touched by it, and to walk through it, and therefore is their evolution. And even though there seems to be so much challenge and change right now that seems to be very threatening, there are equally as many groups, collectives on the planet and around the planet who bring an effective change of a higher, as you would call it, higher, more expanded frequency of what we would call love. And that in itself is humming. There are these beautiful sounds around the globe and even within the solar system that are constantly moving in and through to keep the frequency of the planet balanced more cohesively so that it retains its structure. Because often what's happened in other places is that the structure hasn't been able to be kept at that level of necessity. And so planets then, explode or implode. Not to the extent of like Star Wars when Tatooine or wherever explodes, or Carrie Fisher is like, oh my God, you just murdered all 6 million people. But there is a truth to that. Not necessarily that there's a death ray out there that can do that. It's a collective. Everything is consensus. Everything is consensus. And if there's enough people in consensus about some issue, that is going to be the majority, which of course people might say, well, duh, of course that's the way it is. But no, and the reality of it is, if people really are in the consensus that there is what appears to be green in your room, Sally, then it's green. But if enough people say, no, that's brown, then they see brown. And it's the same way with any kind of material, anything that's developed, any discoveries. If enough people are in consensus with it, because for some reason they believe it without necessarily it being true, what is truth, but what a consensus displays and how we see things. So in your planet system right now, you're battling for consensus. You're battling for consensus. And there's just two items you're battling for: fear and love. And love not being the hippy dippy, peace, love, let's have sex with everybody. Although I did have lifetimes like that and they were quite enjoyable. But the point is, it's a collective of love that is in harmony, that is in order, that is in focus of life and its creation. And of course, so much of the problem comes from people who are very disconnected from the understanding that we never die. We never die. And the other part of it is that we have to pray to some outside force to give us any kind of freedom from our sins, past sins, future sins. It's all this mythology that has kind of grown through its time period.
May I ask a question, Seth?
Yes.
It seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, that a lot of what we are facing is heightened polarity. And this idea that there is an other to that's making wrong choices, that's making bad choices, that doesn't have the highest intent of good for the whole. And so, and both sides think they're right, you know? And we've just got this really hard, strong pendulum swing from side to side with this polarity at the moment. Is there anything that we can do outside of ourselves to assist with that? Or is it purely an individual act in
Good
order to
question.
make things better?
Well, it's always an individual act because you are part of the collective. And as your part is up to you or I or Jeannie or whomever to be in balance and be in love and not in fear. And if you're very aware of yourself and carry a lot of energy, it's really important that your energy be focused in the love and the balance and the harmony for the creation itself, our own inner creation, and then the people out there, the creation that is in and around and through us all. On the other hand, yes, there is a polarity because it's like a child fighting to run the family. the people who say one thing and do another. Say, oh, this is important to us, but then they turn around and they're totally hypocritical. It doesn't matter the sign of, what Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Republican, whatever. It's the people that say one thing and do another. It's action oriented. And when the actions are away from the spoken word, that's even more difficult, because a word is spoken, it's put into form. So if any politician or any person says, oh, I support such and such and so, and that looks to be full of light and love, and then it has an action that goes against that, then they're battling themselves. And you have enough people doing that, and then the collective is battling itself. And yet it's the whole problem, because it says one thing and does another. And how many of us just in our own lives at times say, oh, I promise I'll take you to the park today, to your doggy, or to your friend or your kid or whatever. Oh, we can't do it today, I'm so sorry. And then there's all this kind of conflict. And so it's very important that our words match our action. This isn't new stuff. This is stuff that, the good book tells you this, all that other stuff tells you this. But the primary issue in this particular situation right now is fighting within fighting with their own psychology about who is really the boss. And some people think that Jesus is the boss, and the Muslim stuff, so the other person's, the boss. There is no boss. And that can be very frightening to people. And so in order to protect their need or their desire to feel like there is a higher energy, an entity that's going to save them, or bless them, or whatever, that's where everything starts to fall apart. Because you are the creators of your own world. And I know the phrase goes around co-creators, and I got Jeanne to finally drop that, because really you're not co-creators. I mean, you might find somebody, like when you're doing this podcast, and yeah, you two are creating this together, but you still have to create within yourself first. The I am. That is where you create. You either create through love or you create through fear. And part of being here and incarnating is to learn about all the structures of consciousness that are here in this particular realm, in this plane of consciousness, which holds such uneven temperaments and ideas, and is very limited because of the ego. It's all about learning, and Jeanne's focus is very much a Sethian focus, as far as I'm concerned, because it really influenced her. Is the ego is that part of ourselves that steps in to protect us. And we say, well, you can't be anything without your ego. Well, actually, there are a lot of other parts of consciousness that are probably more profoundly influencing you than you allow. But in the traditional or the expansion of psychology, and in its infancy, is still about ego and this and that and mother complexes. And yes, there are those kinds of things, but it goes beyond that, and it's linked to things that people haven't yet considered, because the world has not really supported that. And there's not enough of consensus in that to be able to set that next part of the journey on. And one thing I'm hoping that Jeanne will be able to do is something she's always wanted to do, and that is to write about what she calls spiritual psychology, which is a lot of the work that she does when she does energy work to help people not only heal their trauma, but to remove the energetic which continues to promote it. It's like taking the record out of the CD, so that it's no longer there to access, to promote whatever thing keeps going around and around. Now, where does this come in with the Seth of the 60s and the 70s with Jeanne and all of my cosmic stuff? Well, it was time for the planet, at least the portion of the planet that had said it was ready, and I watched that as an oversoul energy to know where the populace is it time for this? And for me, what's happening is I see, oh, well, there's a whole pocket of energy over there that looks like they could receive what I would like to share. So that's why I would come in with Jeanne. There were others that I came in with, but into a more limited aspect of the energy that I'm a part of, in bits and pieces, because you know, you start in first grade in terms of certain math, but you can't go to algebra unless you're a genius, and that's very unusual. But you have to take steps to the more advanced forms of uh, mathematics or language or anything like that. So it's just to say that I'm limited to one or two mediums is very inaccurate. And I don't care because I'm not here again to be worshipped or prayed to. I'm here just to disseminate information as a guest lecturer, if you want to call it that. And so when I saw everything ready, and Jane and I had experiences before, and there was this agreement between us. So I came in to her because she was a writer, and then all of this stuff could come through. And my purpose of that was to set up because there was this movement in consciousness that was happening, and I wanted to set up an idea of being, you know, multidimensional realities and everything going on at the same time, so people could really expand their ideas of what the universe is about and have an understanding about how all that works. And so I laid that foundation all those years ago for people to open their conscious minds to something bigger and beyond, because they were already starting to have those experiences and they were questioning it and they wanted it. But then after all those years and that settled for a long time, then I was coming in to other people, including Jeanne, to help understand what do you do with that information. It's great that we're all these beings of light and we can go to planet Zircon and we can channel Zor the Thor, or we can do this or that, or we can have the good guru, yada yada yada. But what does it do here? What does it do here? So there's a step and a process for everything. So now I'm speaking to, well, what do you do with that information? What do you do with it here? Who are you in the midst of all this? So there's this fine line about being this expanded, amazing energy that goes beyond anything that we can imagine. And then a part of that energy is in a life form in this system right now. And how does that apply, and how do we work with it? And how do we balance that? And so hopefully the third set of Seth, which would probably be Seth 2100 if we get there, and that'll be, and I'm being a little facetious there, but putting everything into the totalness, the wholeness of everything, and being able to move through the idea of separation, move through that whole idea. Yes, Gary.
Yeah, I wanted to add, just stepping back a bit to what you had said. I heard this wonderful, if you use fear as an acronym, uh, fear experiences appearing real. So they're not real. It's the absence of love, I would assume. And when I say love, I'm talking about a love that is all encompassing. Most people don't understand the word. They think it's love is from me to an object outside of myself. But it is not. It engulfs you and everything. So would you say fear is the opposite of love?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
And the issue with that is, it's funny that I'm quoting her daughter because really uh, Kylie got a lot of her understanding from our conversations and from others. Kylie shared with Jeanne not too long ago. She said, "There's metaphorically, there's three planets. There's the dark planet. There's the one in the middle. For lack of a better way of placing it, it's both dark and light, which is the planet that you guys are residing on. And then there's the planet that is light. The first Earth is what Kylie called it. And so we have these various levels and steps. And if we can get out of the dark planet and get into the middle, which is where you all are, and then that's where you really find your evolutionary uh, legs, if you will, and understand to how you turn consciousness from dark to light, from fear to love, unconditional. And Gary, when you say things aren't real, everything's real. There's nothing that isn't real. Fear is real, love is real. It's just a matter of what you feed, what you create, what you work with, what you desire, because you can then uncreate, disengage from the consensus of others who live in fear. But again, in consensus, it becomes real. And I know that's not necessarily a popular attitude, but I find that it can be offensive, whether it should be or not, to people when they get so tied to their stories. And so from that point of view, I would say it's real for the moment. You know, the illusion is that it has to be through infinity. The illusion is that we have to suffer through infinity. The illusion is that we have to live in fear through infinity. That's the illusion. The actual things that are going on are quite real, but they are definitely temporary. And I think that's a point that people miss, because we need to honor every step we've taken, bad or good, light or dark. I've had many, many, many incarnations on various places within the system, and I am limited to this system. I am not beyond that, but that just shows you the enormity of my energetic experience and how I bring parts of myself in with all of that I know to help others who hold the energy of me or teach or whatever their process is, to help others expand and reach for a larger, broader consciousness of creation. I will say this about the journey in this world. None of us come here thinking that we will earn brownie points to the rest of the universe. It's not like, oh, well, if I go to the Earth plane, let's say I'm going to choose the year 1942 because it's going to be really horrible. And if I do well there, then I'm going to be able to be launched into another place in time, in another system somewhere, and maybe I can avoid the evolutionary steps. And let me say this in that understanding. Evolution is a process. And if we think we can avoid a couple of the ingredients in a recipe, we can, but it might not taste so good afterwards when it comes out of the oven or it gets out of the skillet. So it behooves us to take the necessary indicated steps, even if it's just brief, to make sure that we have a complete field of all the complex ideas and things. And that's why we come into this realm and have, as Jeanne teaches, to cluster lives and other lives with one theme, and how we get stuck in those stories and how to clear that and understand that. And it goes way beyond that. She's one of the things I like about Jeanne is she realizes that as much as she knows it's very limited to her area, and doesn't wish to go beyond and say, oh, you know, I'm so enlightened that I see such and such and so and so. She knows enough not to go certain places and just to let certain things unfold. The human desire to know what's ahead because they're frightened is so overpowering. And that's when we make mistakes. And that's why we don't allow the flow. We don't have the trust in ourselves. The consciousness can flow in the field of love. And when we stop that energetic flow, then we create all sorts of havoc for ourselves. And it just sometimes it's a little bit of problem, and then sometimes it's a huge bit of problem. The ego is running full rampant when people feel threatened. So in your environment now, all these people are feeling threatened. And when people come to Jeanne and say, so what can I do? I'm so frightened right now. And she'll say, well, first of all, sit back and take some deep breaths and realize that you're here, but this is not all of who you are. And it's up to you. The only thing we can do is take care of our individual collective and vibrate accordingly. And then if we find ourselves vibrating to like minds, and then as a collective of like minds, we build more consciousness, and we just grow and multiply and divide, and we connect with all these people. And then, you know, there is this undercurrent of security that comes from the root of knowing who we are and realizing that everything is as it should be, even when it doesn't look like it should be. But this is a free will community, and people either show up or they don't, and things are changing all the time. Jeanne wants me to share an experience she had about a year ago, maybe a little longer, with one of her clients when they would go into certain spaces in consciousness, which she calls energy bands. And that's not a bad description. I have other words, but this really works for her. So because it works for her, it helps her teach better. And so she and her client went into this very different energetic space, very expanded. I was really excited to see her step into this. And she was, it was like a huge hall. I mean, 10 times bigger than anything you could imagine. And she saw all these different lives and all these different planets all doing what they were doing simultaneously at the same time, and realizing that, yeah, we had the chaos in the earth plane, and we had the good stuff over here, and we had stuff that's in between over here, and she realized everything was in order. The way that it was presented to her, everything was in order. It's not comfortable to be in chaos. It's not comfortable to see people hurting people. It's not comfortable to feel threatened. And so we do want to be rescued. We really do want to have some alien being come in and, take a bullhorn and say, stop it, or you're all going to just disintegrate yourselves, and I'm the boss. But it's not the directive. It's not the way we work. But when we step out of ourselves and step back and expand into so many other places and realize, oh, we're okay. We're in balance. There is the fear, oh, the planet's going to disappear. Well, planets disappear. I mean, or it's just not going to be habitable for a while. Well, that has happened too. So what?
Yeah, because we so entertain that this is what we are, and this is only a fraction in eternity of what we are. It's very hard for people to wrap their heads around that, to realize this is just a sidestep in eternity. As I believe it was Joel Goldsmith who put it, a human lifetime is a parenthesis in eternity. So,
Very, very well put, Gary. And I can tell that you're a partial Sethian at heart. So thank you. And it's true. It's hard for people because they don't feel they have any control. So the feel of control is not there.
It seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, from my perspective, that we come here for the contrast. We come here for the polarity so that we do know the difference, so that we can feel what love is compared to hate, compared to fear, because that contrast doesn't exist in every vibrational realm.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And it's like, for people who might be new to these concepts, would be like, let's say that you had a very wonderful family and you were very well loved, and then a set of circumstances happened, and you lost your family support, and then the family was disintegrating, and you had to have someplace to live, so they put you in a care home, or they put you in a foster care home. And let's say it was not a very nice place to be. But the contrast is there between what you had and what you didn't have. And we can get lost in that, or we can promise ourselves that we're going to go through that into the next stage. And the next stage would be doing what we can do to have our schooling, and then find our health within ourselves on all those levels, and then attract another positive, loving experience, but having the wisdom to know how to share with others the understanding that they know what it's like to feel lost or unsupported, and be able to tell the story to others to help them then reinvent on a positive way their own life circle, and their learning curve of moving forward. It's rather simplistic, but the other thing that I think is really important that I would like to share with you, and I want to get into it a little bit today, is what you can do in the next 20 years. And normally I'm not a person that will share prophecies, but we watch for what coalesces, which thought structure has more authority at the time. I don't like to say power so much. Authority seems to me is a way of explaining it without going into the dark side. Not that I would, but the authority, and what can we do? Well, the more we, and Gandhi is a part of this because that's what he speaks to, the more we go into our own authority and understand and rise above and beyond the storm. It's like if you're at the beach and you get caught up in the waves, and they can be very tumultuous and you're battered around, and you think that's what life has to be. But then if you know how to do some deep sea diving, and you get underneath, and it's just the most beautiful, serene environment you've ever been in. It's able to go underneath it or rise above it, and have the perspective carry you through the seeming turmoil that you're in, and you can quell the storms around you. whether it's in your family, whether it's in your community. And it isn't about, running for office, although people might be led to do that, which is fine. If it's a positively led decision, going back to caretaking for the earth and saving the planet, it's about being in the authority of ourselves, and then of course, if we're being led to do something, then do it. You guys are being led to do what you're doing here, to bring more understanding, more wisdom. This is a very powerful tool to many people, because this energy is in this podcast. And when people watch this, they will feel the energy of the moment, which is rise above, walk through, understand that's not where you're stuck, unless there are problems in thought that keep one person ruminating, or 2,000 people ruminating about the dire straits. And certainly there are those moments in human time where you're going to feel somewhat frustrated or disappointed. And I would say to you, that is an okay thing to do, but move quickly, honor it, and then move quickly. What can I do? I'm going to stay in my peaceful zone. I'm going to do what I'm led to do. If that's to go out there and crusade for something, then that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to do it because I know I affect change positively. I'm not going to do it because I'm scared of what's going to happen. And I know, again, that is hard not to get involved with, but energy is everything. And it's up to us to be in a cohesive space of that truth, of that authority, of we don't have to be in that space. We can very much choose to be in the other space. It may seem a little harder to hold on to, a little more etheric at the moment, but when we are able to compensate from everything around us and go into that space, we become that energy, which is strikingly different and beautifully serene and calming. And that takes over. And that takes over in a way that it connects with the other groups that are doing similar things, and there are many other groups that are doing this. And to support the fact that you aren't necessarily here to do this directly, but in a time of, oh, this is the way the planet went, okay, what can I do? Because there were various paths at different times. This has been an incredible 150 years on your planet in terms of things. So many things. All the kitchen sink, everything's been thrown into one. You have the outer world stuff, you got the inner world stuff, you got wars, you got dissension, you got atrocities, everything, and then you got all this media and everything. It's like you've thrown everything that can create chaos into the mix. And then you think you got the plague because you got COVID, and then you got the plague because you got this, and then and so it's like the mind is so overloaded, it has to sort and classify. But the most important sorting is, who am I? I am not that. I'm not the outer world. I am not consciousness in terms of darkness and chaos. And if there is anything in me that still is in chaos, then I need to clear that. And because that's what our friend Dr. Hugh Lin did with the Ho'oponopono, to clear the darkness within ourselves first, even if it's just a slight bit of this. The other thing that's interesting is, because we are living many lives all at once, there are other lives out there at other time periods that might have seemed like it was in the past or in the future that are bleeding through into this one. We try to prevent that bleed through from being very strong. It needs to be very limited, but at the same token, what you do here affects those other life forms, and what they do there affects this life form. And so when you talk about this as an illusion, that is a way to try to describe something that really doesn't have words yet. The American English language just has not yet created the space for those kind of words, because they haven't even embraced the idea as a collective that we live infinite number of lives all at the same time. And when they finally get into consensus about that, then the words will appear, but it doesn't appear until there's enough people that are in that place. So in many ways, you guys are way showers. You came in for your own things to do, things you wanted to learn, things you wanted to clear, but then things that happen on the world stage, and then you go, oh well, maybe I can add myself to this, or I can add myself to that. Where am I most needed? What can I do? And that is to be the light.
I love everything you've said, and I resonate with it deeply. And it reminds me of something another channeled entity typically says, Bashar, through Daryl Anka, and that is, to pursue the thing you're passionate about, to pursue the things that you love. And that very much still fits into this topic for me, because if we're pursuing what we love rather than going against what we fear, then we do change. We do shift ourselves as well as all of the people around us. And really, it's a beautiful message. And I appreciate you being willing to come and share some of that with us.
You're very welcome.
It's often said or communicated from your side of life that we are heralded for coming here, that we're celebrated because it is a hard planet. Would you agree with that?
Yes, well, we have bets on people. I'm
What?
just joking. In terms of, we don't know whether you're stupid coming here or you're really, really knowing that you want this experience. And of course, Seth would never say stupid, but I just did. The point is that there are many, many places to put your energetic,
Right,
and this is just one of many. This is considered one of those places that it's not for the faint of heart.
right, right.
The thing is, and I know Jeanne has experienced this because she's been at the birth of three of her four grandchildren. She would see the people on the other side escorting the spirit of the baby coming in after they were born, and it's particularly with the one her 7-year-old grandson. She watched the team that was bringing him in successfully leave after about an hour after he was born, and she could feel the sadness as they left because they knew what he was coming into.
Right.
And it
Right.
was a very profound experience to feel that. These are very real experiences. One of the things too about being here is that you have, Sally, you said that the experiences you can't have other places. There's this whole range of consciousness that has formed in this particular realm that is not other places. But there are other places that are similar to this. This is not the only place where there is a seeming division or a disconnection. There are other places or planets or realms where there is a human-like civilization, where there is a density of energy. But they don't necessarily have the same construct of learning that this place does. And it doesn't really matter too much. It's just nice to know that you're not alone, that this is a repeat in many different places and levels, depending on what the journey is, and depending on what is wanted. This is a place of communication that is oral, that is the mouth moves. And there are other places, of course, where I reside and others reside, where it's totally what you call telepathic, where there is a melding of the minds and the conversations are in the mind. That is often what spirits use when they're communicating with you, is that they're just sending the telepathic information. Although there are other times when they really try to bring in their voice sound, so they're recognized in terms of the patterns when they're talking through a medium or when she's writing or he's writing things down or experiencing things. There's an unlimited amount of creative opportunity. And as we get more profoundly advanced here, the more you see here that you can't see now. There are what Jeanne refers to as energy bands around the specific planet that are very much a part of the planet but are yet unseen because the vibrations haven't broken through yet. They haven't broken through yet. And one of the things that we are hoping for as a collective in the next, well, here goes time again, the next 100, 150, 175 years is for the expansion of consciousness to come to some point that these other bands of energy are experienced and seen, which include other life forms that might now seem to you as extraterrestrials or as more advanced beings. But they only show up when the frequency expands.
Right.
And I love that because that's how we can be so close energetically, but yet not be physically seen except maybe temporarily as a bleed through or our desire to let you know that there's something other than you that's here, to just let you know. When people say this planet's isolated, it's not an isolation that has it's been sent down from the Galactic Federation or for the brain poobahs of the galaxy. It's because of the frequency. It's not some grand being. See, that's the thing also that is so arbitrary and gets in the way of consciousness, is this idea that life is outside of you, because everything's inside of you. How you perceive this podcast, how you perceive me, how you perceive the world is all from your inner perspective and who you are, what you see, and what you believe in. That is what shapes the reality.
Mhm.
And that's why
Right.
some people can see beyond and others because
And
of that. Yes.
yeah, you were talking about language earlier, and I have thought about this quite a lot in the past, that it's very challenging to conceive of something you don't have language for. And so until we start to develop language that becomes widespread, a lot of these concepts that are just past our understanding, we won't quite get there. Do you know what I mean? Until we have the symbolic, verbal, written language to
It
point the
almost has
way
to
to
be a
it.
simultaneous experience.
Yeah.
It's like you can't tell which came first, the chicken or the egg. It's a simultaneous experience that's there. I want to get into one area. Do we have any more time?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Away from politics and interesting things, I want to address an area that Jeanne is not really familiar with, so she's going to have fun with this. I'm pushing some of her energy a little bit to a side so I can bring more of myself in here. It has to do with time travel. It has to do with the concept of traveling here, there, and time. And of course, my lectures have been on everything is simultaneous, everything's going on at once. But within that structure, you have to have a way of describing it, as was stated earlier. Words and concepts haven't really created themselves enough yet. And the reason I want to state this is that those of you who are really in touch with not just my understanding, but those of us who come to bring what we know to you so that you can remember yourselves what you already know. One of the things that I would say, and this might be a little, I don't know, concerning for people who are looking at this podcast and going, oh, do you mean I can time travel and how does that work and blah blah blah. But what I'm saying to you isn't so much that it's something that you have to do right now, is it's something that you know. And there's a difference between doing something and knowing something. The reason being, if I was to say to you right now that in a meditation we could travel 500 years into what you consider your future, and I would take you there and you would definitely see things because that's the energy that I carry with me. Um, you can either have an incredible experience and love everything you see, or it can be a really dark experience for you. And the two of you could have two entirely different experiences depending on where your consciousness is at the deepest level of your soul. And that's what's very interesting. Because if people are going to do something like that, and you have 10 people who see it this way and 12 people will see it a different way, what does that do to the reality? There's a struggle. So which one is true? Well, depending on the consensus of the group you're with and the majority of it, that's what's true, the consensus of it. That is how tenuous our ability is to touch the future, and how easily changeable it is, and how some mediums will say, well, I saw it this way, and that's the absolute truth. And other mediums or prophets or meditators will say, well, I saw it this way, and that's the truth. And yet, Gary, that is the truth for them in their story, but isn't necessarily the truth of what's going to happen. So when people say to a medium or to whatever, oh, I want to know what the future is. I want to know blah, blah, blah. And that medium taking his or her consciousness with him to that place will see whatever he's able to see because of how he believes. But it may not be what takes place, because if we're limited in how we can see the future or experience the future, then that's what we bring back to the person sitting with us or whatever. The big part of that is You know, they quote like Notre Dame and all the others, and it was prophesied here and it was prophesied there. Again, even in the Bible for sure. You know, oh, you know, we're gonna just rise and be taken because God loves us better than the other people. Again, it's all consciousness, as we know. So what we need to protect against, and I hadn't prepared Jane for this, so she's like, oh wow, okay. Um, we have to protect against the prophecy of self. In other words, those parts of us that really want to know what the future is going to look like and think we have a handle on it, sit in a group or just, you know, or by ourselves, travel to what we think is an extended period of time, which would be time travel, and then we see what we see. And then we come back either horrified or we come back feeling blessed. Now, in Jean's case, when she went into that big hall that she spoke of, or I spoke to you about, or that she experienced, fortunately for her, she had enough consciousness to see a bigger, more balanced reality. But somebody else that would be going into that space might see something very different. And so the reason why prophecy can be a double-edged sword is that none of us really have the ultimate skill to push away years of problems, lifetimes of darkness or light. It is very hard to have a really truthfully inline, balanced consciousness to see effectively what is going to happen. Because it's already happened, because everything's happening at once. So along the way, there could be a different configuration or something that coalesces that hasn't been seen. But between here and that point, in a split second, it could have changed. And that's very important for people to understand. Well, how did this happen? And how did this happen? Because in that split second, something else stepped in and coalesced a whole different version and changed it around. That's why we have all these variations. And they'll say, oh, there's a parallel lives or there are parallel experiences. I don't care for that term. I don't want to say I dislike that term, but I just don't care for that term because it really is not circular. It's this way. And it doesn't account for all the ways like a helix can connect and create variations on a theme. So I know it's fun. Some people who think they've got into the future and they've seen things. And as long as it's fun for them and it doesn't cause any kind of disharmony, that's a good thing. I mean, if we see the future and everything's peaceful like Star Trek, you know, more or less, that's wonderful. But we could easily go ahead because we think it's in front of us, a Star Wars situation. And frankly, that's all existed. Those stories are real somewhere in time.
Yeah. I often have this, well, one, I don't worry or think too much about the future, but on an individual basis, I would think if you want to know your particular future, where are you right now? What's going on within you at this moment? Because you're setting the vibrational tone for that future to exist in.
Exactly.
And I think there's a preoccupation on the earth plane of, and I think it's so misunderstood. I much more agree with what you've said today and in the past with exploring past lives. That can become such a diversion from looking at where are you right now? Do you I mean, certainly it could maybe answer certain questions, but it's not linear like people think. You know, I lived in the 1800s and that's somewhere in a past. It's all going on, as you say, simultaneously. So I think we need to bring the focus on the planet back to what's going on within you right now. Where are you? What are you vibrating at? That's not a good way of putting it, but you know, I think what I mean. So would you concur with what I'm saying?
Absolutely. wanting to know where we've lived before, like you say, can be a diversion because people don't really understand how that really is framed. So, for instance, if they have gotten a past life regression, which Jean used to do, and she doesn't anymore because she can just see it. Oh, I was I was Cleopatra, or I was, Henry V, or they don't understand that we come in these various life forms, uh, like a family tree with all the branches and the leaves. It's another metaphor that Jean uses that works for me to communicate with her. And that is that you can have a whole branch that was very associated with one particular family. And you'll have the memories of all of those. It's like me as Seth, I'm not bringing all myself in terms of the oversold energy. Would say I'm bringing in about, 5% of Seth, and that's a stretch. But I've worked with Jean for so long that it's not hard to do. But when I first came in, I wasn't working. It was probably a 2.5, and now she's been able to hold the energy more. But 5% is a lot of me, but it isn't something that she just automatically stepped into. And along those lines, the reason why it is important with the right understanding, knowing our creation, is what our themes have been, so that we can correct them. Again, it's about here, like you say, and those are about understanding what we've created here, so we can remove the things that no longer serve. And it's like I go to food reference. It's all because we find our recipes. We find our recipes. What ingredients work for us? What structures of thought worked for us? Um, Jean calls it a menu. What on the menu are you going to bring into this lifetime? With the potential of maybe some other things. Column A, column B, column C, whatever that's going to be. The thing is, because it is all happening at once, it is all very important. But there has to be a way to sort and classify so that it doesn't become overwhelming. And that's why in this existence, we have what we feel is this separation. But actually, it's a frequency that monitors itself. When you have the frequency that monitors itself, then you can't really go into places you don't belong because you can't reach that frequency. So it's a whole process of helping you get from one place to another in that regard. The other thing also too, and why we get so displaced with, oh, I was this in that life, I was this in that life, is because we're still looking to be rescued. When we get here, it's like, oh my God, it's like the water's cold, I know, the water's cold, I know, the water's cold, I know. The water's cold. Well, yeah, you've been told, but we forget that. And so rescue me, whether it's an alien or whether it's some, mythological being, save me. And we are really our own mythological being. We are our own guru. We just have to uncover it and remember it. But sometimes that's not our choice in this lifetime. Sometimes people come in not wanting to remember that part of themselves, but to want to learn about a new part and growing another part of themselves, because it's like a big, huge color wheel. There are many colors that we cannot see with our naked eye, and they've tracked them. And Jean has a friend. Well, it's Regina's daughter, who is a wonderful artist, and she's shown the color wheel. There are all sorts of colors that we can't see with our naked eye. And that's the way we are. All sorts of ourselves that we haven't yet explored. But we're this incredible circular energy that has all this delightful aspects to creation and who we are. In the morning, it should be, what am I going to find out about myself today? What kind of an explorer am I going to go on today? And they say, well, I can't do that because I have to work. I have to make money. Well, when you go to work and make money, see what parts show up. It doesn't have to be, I have to work, I can't do it, or, such and such and so and so. And the last thing that I really would like to say to everybody that is listening, a personal message, besides all of the heavy guru stuff or the Seth stuff or all the multidimensional realities. And I know that so many people who are really have it understanding say the same thing. We have absolute power in our lives, absolute authority. The struggle is to remember it and to find out how to do that. That's why we come here. That's finding the light in this thickness and this energetic. Who am I in this? Where are my parts? Can I find them? Can I uncover them? Can I incorporate them? Can I become that person in this thickness with all of the insanity that seems to be going around? It's not something that any of us have to do. It's what we choose to do. Now, we may have thought structures which keep ourselves programmed to the negative and keep ourselves in the same old story over and over again, and we haven't broke that pattern yet. We talk about karma. Karma is just a consensus that maybe we need to do something better than we did before. Karma is a way of explaining bad things happening to good people. But there's a freedom that knocks on the door of every single person, and we don't often heed the call. The goodness is there, opportunities happen, the light is there, and because of whatever reasons, the personality shrinks away from it. Oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I'm not good enough for that. Well, people might call me out on that. And there's all that fear. This is a planet of fear, plain and simple. But it also is a planet of love. It's not the number one planet of darkness. We're in the middle with dark and light. And then our heading, metaphorically, is to the planet that's totally light. And that is a small model for where we are right now. So understand that we have the authority. It's in us, accessible. We might have to peel away, those thought structures, those behaviors, those patterns, those belief systems, because we inherit them when we come into this environment. We didn't necessarily have them outside, although there is personality that exists because I'm a personality, but it's differently shaped. And the wisdom to know is, okay, I am more than my physical body. I'm more than the collective of consciousness in this realm. What does that mean for me? What are my goals? What do I need to do? Do I need to do anything? And then just allow that to roll around inside, keeping the boundaries of self-doubt and hatred and anger at bay. The real power is internal power. And all that we see in the outer world where it looks so imbalanced are people on whatever side struggling to be in charge. Nobody is the boss of us. We are the boss of ourselves. But when we say that to another, it's because we feel very insecure.
Mhm.
And so we have to say, well, you're not the boss of me. But we don't know what that really means because we have to be the boss within ourselves. And all those people are struggling to be the boss of themselves, whatever niche they're trying to call out. So when you look at the outer world and are reminded that they're not necessarily in their holy space, sacred aim of divinity, understand that they're just seeking to find their own power and authority in themselves, their own boss. Your message in your meditation, in your prayers, in your thought is, I know that you will find your balance, even to the people that you abhor. I know that you will find your light. I know that you will find your goodness. I know that you will find your compassion, your love, your I don't even want to say humanity. You're going to find your light. And that has to be our prayer because it's from love and not from fear. And that is what I will leave with you when you want to know what the world needs. I've said it to you in various ways because I know it's necessary. Know that you're not alone because there are many, many spirits with all of you, helping you, shading you, guiding you, loving you. And that world is more real when you talk about realities than what you see and know in the physical, because the physical is only a limited frequency
Mhm.
of sound. And once you understand and expand to know the world around you that is not seen because the body is not there, that expands your frequency exponentially, and you have more understanding and wisdom that come into you. When her daughter died, when Jeanne's daughter passed, and she was so distraught because there'd been so much darkness in her family, Kylene would say to her, but Mom, I'm right here. I just don't have my body. I'm right here. And I'm sure, Sally, that you can understand that yourself. I'm right here.
Absolutely.
But we're so geared to the physical density that it's hard for us to make that transition over to accept that beyond the physical body, there is all this other wonderful life living. And once we accept that, and it changes the whole um, chemistry within an individual and as a collective, and it comes into the DNA, and then we evolve, and the planet evolves some more. Who knows, at some point in time, that model of those 3 planets won't exist anymore. We have no idea where it's headed. We just know where it is right now, for the most part. So let's expand and go where no man or woman has ever gone before, or gender reflective, right or wrong, and just move on and see what it has for us, and not get pulled into the abyss of, I'm trying to find the power, I'm trying to find the boss. You are the boss, but from an unlimited, unconditional love essence. And I will leave all with that unless you have any other questions.
I think
Right.
that's been a cupful. And thank you very much for joining us today, Seth, and Jeannie, for your work in bringing Seth through. It's been a delightful conversation. Thank you so much, and come back and see us again.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.